we're having vast demonstrations in New York City, and these differences between the Columbia University's president and the students on the issue that we are witnessing in Gaza, and this conflict, this ongoing conflict in Gaza. Could you describe us what's going on right now in New York City, or maybe in America, in the United
It
States?
turned out that it's gone way beyond New York City. Right here, it's the center is Columbia University, where the president of the university arrested 100 students yesterday and said, if you're supporting the Palestinians, if you're opposing to the genocide in Gaza, you are anti-Semitic. And we want to stand with our trustees who said that they won't give us more money if we don't stop all of this insistence that supporting Gaza, because they really want to kill all of the Jews. And this enraged all of Columbia and said, nobody's talked about anything about killing Jews. We're talking about stopping the genocide in Gaza. The university president said, if you support the United States, the United Nations, and if you campaign to support the International Court of Justice, you're anti-Semitic, and we will not have anti-Semitism on Congress because that makes our Jewish students feel insecure. Well, the Jewish students all joined the protest and say, we don't believe in what Israel is doing to the Gazians. We're assimilated. They do not believe that when Netanyahu said, if you don't support Israel, you're anti-Semitic. And they said, no, we're Jewish and we don't support what Netanyahu is doing. And we don't support what Biden is doing, because we realize that Congress and Biden are completely on the side of the genocide that's occurring. And what began as a protest in Columbia has now spread to New York University, to the New School for Social Research. There are similar protests in Yale University and other universities across the country, because they've seen in the last month Congress having hearing, especially by the Republican Stefanik, who's been browbeating the presidents of Harvard, of the University of Pennsylvania, and Columbia's president was away for the first time, but the Harvard people apologized for having students protesting against what's happening in Gaza. And the students said, we're amazed. Why didn't you stand up for us and say to Ms. Stefanik, the McCarthyite Congress lady, we should be proud that our students have a sense of fair play. We should be proud that our students are supporting international law and feel strong enough about social justice that they're willing to demonstrate for it, and in Columbia's case, even go to jail for it, as they've been 100 people were put in jail 2 days ago overnight. So all of the students are joining together. They are insisting that because Columbia University is so Zionist, is so viciously attacking the Palestinian students. Some Columbia students are Israeli IDF forces that have registered as students. They have been attacking the demonstrators, spraying them with skunk, which is a kind of special, awful smelling chemical that's indelible to indicate the demonstrators to be beaten up later or arrested to show who they are. These are the biggest demonstrations since the 1960s against Vietnam. And in fact, the Columbia demonstrators have said that they have studied the Vietnam demonstrations as exactly how to do it. And what happened back in those demonstrations, you were probably too young to remember, but at Kent State, the university ordered the soldiers to begin shooting at the students. And they actually were shooting at the students who were opposing America's war in Vietnam. Well, what is happening now is not only a revulsion against Israel, but a realization that it's the United States and Israel are hand in hand, and this absolutely kills any hope for not only for Biden to be reelected, but for Democrats to be reelected, because they realize that the suppression of academic freedom, the refusal to let students demonstrate peacefully on the lawn, to say we want to disinvest in Israel. You have to do something to separate American policy for Israel. And if it means voting the Democrats out of power, even if it brings crazy Donald Trump in, we've got to show that any government who does such an aggressive destruction is going to be out of power. The students have been locked out of Columbia University. They've been locked out of their dormitories. They've been prevented from, suspended and prevented from taking their examinations to pass the courses that they're in. One of the students who was arrested was the daughter of a Palestinian congresswoman from Minnesota, an Arab congresswoman. So you can imagine the publicity that all of this is getting throughout the press. And it's really, you have two waves that are happening. Number one, the McCarthyite period of the 1950s, when you had the hearings, McCarthy was calling just about everybody a communist. Many Hollywood screenwriters and actors were blacklisted. Many professors were blacklisted. Especially many people were fired from the State Department that said that Chiang Kai-shek was a murderous gangster, and that Mao was going to indeed lead the Chinese Revolution because the people wanted to overthrow the gangsters. Anybody who even was sympathetic to China was fired from the State Department, and there was a whole big right-wing bloodbath. That's what's happening in Congress today. But academically, there never was an attack on students just for protesting peacefully and for advocating something like disinvest in Israel, stop giving Netanyahu the bombs every day. From the American point of view, Netanyahu is working for Biden. Biden is telling Netanyahu, please be gentle when you bomb the hospitals and when you shoot the doctors, and especially when you shoot the foreign journalists. Please do it gently and in accordance with the laws of war. Well, of course, all this is against the laws of war. And the United States basically has the position that they're creating chaos. They say there are no rules of war, therefore nobody can do anything against us. The rules in the future are going to be whatever the United States decides, and it's really a war against civilization, because you can just, well, we'll discuss that when we talk about Israel, but what's happening here is just the fact that the students are appalled at the presidents of every university standing with the Zionists and not permitting any expression of sympathy with the Palestinians. In the University of Southern California, before all of this kerfuffle, a Palestinian had been elected valedictorian of her class, that is, to give the speech at the graduation. And it turns out that she had an email where some of her relatives were killed in Gaza. And the university said, well, if your relatives were killed in Gaza, you must want to kill all the Jews. So we won't let you talk because we think you might be a terrorist. This has got day after day headlines in the United States newspapers. It's turning into almost an anti-ethnic attack on Palestinians here mirroring the attack that is occurring in Israel. So any thought that when Biden says we're terribly sorry, we're told Netanyahu to be delicate and delicate with the bombs that we give him week after week after week to keep dropping, please be generous. Please be gentle. You can see what a fiction this is, and it just the hypocrisy of Biden pretending to disagree with Israel while the Americans are pushing Netanyahu on, saying, "Go ahead, keep on doing it," because that's part of the strategy that the neocons have been spelling out for the last 20 years, aiming at basically escalating the war to Iran. And needless to say, the students are aware of this, that what's happening in Israel is part of a longer program to spread war throughout the entire Near East, just as it's spreading war on the periphery of Russia and spreading war on Taiwan. And all that Biden can say is our real enemy is China. We're trying to work with Taiwan in order to prepare for war in 2026, the war that our army has already been drawing up plans for. I mean, this is more than just a local student riot. There's a feeling that this is a war for civilization, and if they don't stop what's happening here, it's just going to go on and on in a disastrous way.
Since
Yes.
you mentioned the conflict in Gaza and the war that we're witnessing right now, new escalations between Iran and Israel, which is no good sign for anybody. Who's benefiting from this conflict in Gaza, in your opinion?
Well, no matter what, Palestinians are losing. The Gaza bombing has resumed, and the killing has spread to the West Bank in the last week. So Israel is doing to the Palestinians in the West Bank what it's doing in Gaza. But it's hard to say that Israel is winning. It is doing all the killing, but it's becoming an outcast in the world. And so is the United States. That's why I was describing the riots. I think Biden's pretense is he's trying to dissociate the United States from Israel, but that's backfired because the whole world sees that it's almost absurd when he asks Netanyahu, to not be so violent, and at the same time, day after day and week after week, he gives them the bombs. He gives them the money, so they can see that they're joined hand in hand, and it's really a symbiotic relationship. And the U.S. is backing Israel in what seems to be an attempt to spread the war to an attack on Iran and spread the war throughout the entire Near East. And the message is go right ahead. So likewise, when Biden and Blinken make public statements saying, Israel's not going to bomb Iran, we've told them not to, everybody's beginning to worry, they're trying to dissociate themselves from an attempt that Israel may end up trying to bomb Iran. Well, we've seen what happened in the last week. Iran might be hurt by an Israeli attack, but now that it's being supported by Russia and China, Iran cannot possibly lose more than a wound, but any attempt to fight Iran is recognized now by Russia, China, and their allies as an attempt to incite a wider war. And Iran has said, Israel will be totally wiped out. So this really is a point of inflection where either all the Palestinians will be wiped out and you'll have a Jewish Nazi state, or Israel will be wiped out, and presumably the Palestinians can reoccupy the land that they were exiled from way back in 1947. I think the problem is militarily that there's no way to avoid Israel from being hurt. and we've seen that its army is not able to protect itself from Iran, and in fact, it has not been able to defeat Hamas. It's instead of fighting Hamas, it's taken out its rage against Palestinians. And Biden and Netanyahu said, "Here's your chance to clean out the whole Palestinian population." You have American officials in the Trump administration already offering to buy beachfront property and turn Gaza into a luxurious place. Biden has pretended to help the Gazans by developing these wharfs ostensibly to deliver food, but they're not delivering any, much food from there. The wharfs are going to be apparently for Israelis to put up their yachts when the wealthiest wealthy buyers buy condominiums on the beachfront. And I think the whole rest of the world is so appalled at this that I won't say winners and losers, but there's a realization that the 85% of the world majority has to break from the US and European support. German support, French support of Israel are just as extreme as the United States. Germany banning Varoufakis from coming in and Palestinians from coming in there. The same thing is happening in Europe, and it's as if a new dividing line has been splitting the whole world into two between, as Rosa Luxemburg said, the choice is between civilization or barbarism. And I'll let your audience decide who are the barbarians and whose civilization. But Russia, China, they've signaled that they are together, and the lineup is such that anyone who tries to disturb the status quo is going to lose. But it looks like they're going to try to that Netanyahu is going to try to stay in office and avoid jail by pulling some new stunt over the next Passover week. Most likely, there's going to be an attack, possibly as early as tonight, on the El Aqsa, the mosque that is the fundamentalist Jews and the American Christians want to rebuild the third temple, hoping that if there is a war, that Jesus will come and take them all up to heaven. That's the craziness that you have out of all this. It's as if a science fiction story has been behind all of this policy, and it's like a zombie movie almost. To answer your question about who's the winner, this genocidal attack is, I think, introduced a note of urgency for the whole world through the whole BRICS in general. And I told you, I think this is a turning point. I think it's the question is whether there are going to be any rules of international law. We've seen Israel break all of the international law, just as Ukraine has been breaking all of the international laws. This really looks like it's the end of the United Nations. What is the point of the United Nations if the United States has a veto on every policy that it has come out with? The rest of the United Nations wanted to recognize a Palestinian state. The US government has pretended for the last 30 years that it backs a two-state solution Palestinian state, but now the United States is Biden, by vetoing the UN proposal to recognize Palestine as a state, Biden said, absolutely not, it's not going to be a state. In other words, Biden is saying, Netanyahu and I are going to end the Palestinian problem and the problem that there are Palestinians. The question is, how are you going to have a rule of law when the United States says we don't want a rule of law because the rule of law won't let us do what we want to do, we do better in a rule without law where we can do whatever we we want and by threats, and are other countries going to create an alternative to the United Nations? And in fact, if there is a break with and a revulsion against what's happening today, they'll not only have to create a new United Nations, they'll have to create a whole set of international institutions that are alternative and free of the IMF and the World Bank, in which the United States also has veto power. If what the United States is doing is morally wrong, then you can't let it have a veto power on people trying to bring it to justice. If there's no way of bringing the United States to justice, then what is the point of the United States that was supposed to have been founded to prevent what is happening today? It's made a charade. There has to be an alternative, or else the expulsion of the United States, Israel, Ukraine, and other U.S. Satellites from becoming members.
Michael, you mentioned the Vietnam War, and how do you see the connection between the Vietnam War and what's going on in Gaza?
Back in the 1960s, I think I've been telling this story before. I worked with at the Hudson Institute, which was run by Herman Kahn, but was a training ground for Israeli intelligence people. And one of the people one man I went around the world with twice, lecturing and debating, was Uzi Ared, who became head of Mossad and is Netanyahu's chief advisor. And way back at that time, there were discussions of, how do you conquer a country? How do you put down a rebellion? And at that time, Herman Kahn said, well, the way to do that is you divide all the country into strategic hamlets. You cut it all up, and that is exactly what Israel has done. Herman was the strategist who developed the Vietnamese policy of strategic hamlets. He wanted to make canals everywhere to just divide the country. Everybody would need a pass to get to be moved, and you've completely isolated the population as if a prison camp. Well, I've been reminded recently that this was not simply the policy of the United States. This was the policy of every European colonial country in the 19th century. It was the policy of France in Africa, and Germany in Africa, and the Boers in South Africa and Indonesia. It was a policy of England. And it was a policy of the United States when it would try to push the American Indians, the Native Americans, into reservations, give them a treaty, and then it would decide, well, now we want to move west and have settlers take over the land, and they drove out the Indians from one territory to another territory, and essentially tried a genocide on them. Most Americans now are very sympathetic with the Indians when they go to Westerners, and if they're cowboy versus Indians, or Indians versus the American cavalry, the audience is cheering for the Indians. Well, I think it's the same throughout most of the global South countries. They remember how the European settler powers have carved up Africa by cutting them all into parts, essentially just subordinating the population, taking their arms away, trying to re-educate them, stripping away any memory of their traditional language, traditional heritage, traditional religion. Every single European power was doing long before Vietnam what is happening now. But the difference is that the European countries have apologized for what they were doing. They've said, we realize that this was really immoral. We realize that we're all human beings. But now you have one country, or two countries. You have Ukraine saying Russians are not human beings. they're subhuman, and you have the Israelis saying Palestinians are not human beings. They must be destroyed in order to keep the human race pure. You have, for the first time since Hitler in World War II, you have this treating of people as inhuman that was very popular throughout the 19th century in the settler states, and but there's been a revulsion about it. And now the same revulsion is being fed towards Israel. And you can imagine what people in Asia are saying. They're looking at Ukraine, they're looking at Israel, and they're saying that's what the United States would like to do to us if there's a regime change colored revolution here. They are a chaos agent. They want to create the chaos to come in and completely take away our ability to do anything that is not supportive of U.S. policy, U.S. neoliberal economic policy, and they're trying to prevent our own self-determination by taking us over. And if we don't stop them now, this is going to be the big showdown. Well, the Americans also in the military is looking at Israel and Ukraine, and they're saying, regarding your question about the winners, well, we're losing our power. That's true. We're losing our military power. We've just spent all of our arms giving them to help the Ukrainians fight to the last Ukrainian, and now to Israel. But there's never going to be a less bad time to have the big showdown that we've been talking about and planning for the last 30 years. Because if we don't go to war with Iran, China, and Russia now, we'll be in an even worse position next year, and an even worse position the year after that, because our power is declining. So let's just try to make a big grab bag, a big attack, turning the whole world into a grab bag, and see whether we have a chance to win. And what you're seeing is the difference between American, and I should say Western, economic diplomacy and Asian diplomacy. The Western, and especially the US diplomacy, is if you don't, we're sitting down to negotiate. If you don't do what we want, we're going to hurt you. Well, compare that to China's diplomacy, which President Xi has done again and again. He said, we're looking for a win-win position, saying, well, what can we do that benefits both sides, so that both sides come out winning? The Americans can't do that. First of all, they say, Donald Trump has said, any deal that America makes, we have to be the winner. But even more important, what does America have to offer the rest of the world as part of a win-win policy? It's deindustrialized itself. It's almost demilitarized itself, except for atom bombs, which is the only real threat that the United States and Israel have on the rest of the world. Its hope is to rule the world somehow by not competing with industrial goods and manufacturers and industrial capitalism, but to say, we want to have monopolies on things that the world needs. We number one, we can control oil. And that's why we have to control the Near East and isolate Venezuela, for instance, and isolate Russian oil. Number two, the big growth area, which everybody's going to need, is information technology and computer chip technology and the etching equipment to make computer chips, and the platforms that people use, such as Meta, or all of the X and Amazon and all of the other programs. And so they're trying to prevent China, Russia, and any other country from having self-sufficiency in these basic needs, so they can threaten other countries with sanctions. Well, you can see that this hasn't worked out the way the United States wanted. It's been a disaster because when you sanction another country for something that it needs, it's going to find a way to produce it itself because otherwise it's going to be in trouble. So the Chinese, for instance, are obviously developing their own chips, and now the American chip makers. I know this is a bit of a divergence, but I'm trying to explain how the world is splitting. The Chinese are saying the American companies are saying, well, now that you've made sanctions against China, you're not letting us trade with China, but there goes our market. 23% of the market, I think, for Intel, or one of the big companies, is China. And they said, if we lose the Chinese market, then we're not going to have enough money to invest in research and development to stay ahead. And China and other countries are going to pull ahead. The United States doesn't see the long term. Their thinking is very short term, and they're looking at the conflict now in Ukraine and Israel as being part of this much broader conflict against China, Russia, and the whole BRICS press. And even in today's Financial Times, there's a big article on the editorial page pointing out quite correctly that the war in Ukraine and Israel is part of this whole broader war, and you have to look at the whole world system that the United States is looking at, and the attempt is for the United States to control the entire world economy. And you should look at what's happening in Gaza right now, just as what has been happening in Ukraine, is a kind of dress rehearsal for all this, saying this is what we can do to other countries if they don't really agree to install our candidates, a client oligarchy and a client government, such as we've already have in Mr. Zelensky in Ukraine, and Mr. Netanyahu playing our role in the Near East by not only being a landed aircraft carrier, but much more than that. Israel is an active player in the U.S. game. Israel is on the spot in charge of recruiting ISIS terrorists to send to Ukraine, to send to the Russian periphery, to send to China, to recruit terrorists, and it's an on-the-spot agent of attack for the American desire to attack Iran. Well, right now, I don't know whether there are statements that the U.S. military have game planned what's going to happen if the United States attacks Iran from all this. Well, the military says America will lose. The neocons say, well, if we may lose your kind of war, but we'll just keep upping the ante. We can, in the end, we can use tactical nuclear weapons, or even stronger than tactical nuclear weapons. That's the kind of discussion that is that the neocons have been talking about for well, actually, I should say 60 years, long before they officially became neocons 30 years ago. This was the kind of discussion that was taking place in the military. I was able to sit in on the discussions with American generals. Herman would bring me along, even though my field was balance of payments. The Defense Department and other departments, clients of the Hudson Institute, wanted to know, how are we going to be able to afford to fight all of these wars if when we have to pay in foreign currency? Well, the answer to that was in my book, Super-Imperialism, which the United States, the largest purchaser, as I think I've said on your show, was the CIA and the Defense Department, that looked at it as a how to do it book by dollarizing the world economy. Well, right now, imagine what's happening in Israel. The big question, Iran has been talking both to Saudi Arabia and to the United Arab Emirates and say, we're all fellow Muslims. How can you not support the Palestinians? Like we're supporting the Houthis and Hamas and the Hezbollah. And the problem for Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Republics is Oh my God, way back in 1971, we made a promise to use all of our oil profits to invest in the United States and to lend in US. We hold our monetary reserves in US Treasury bonds and bills. We have our sovereign wealth fund in US stocks, US bank deposits, US bonds. Just imagine now that the Americans have grabbed Russia's foreign reserves, and the Europeans have grabbed even more of Russia's foreign reserves, that these neighboring Near Eastern countries are afraid that if they make a move to support Palestine or to oppose Israel or to join with Iran, then they're going to lose the last generation of savings that is all in the West. This is what dollarization has led them into, this trap. Well, you've seen China running down its dollar reserves and building up, replacing them with gold. You've seen Russia not holding any more dollar reserves, but using its balance of payments inflows to buy gold. Saudi Arabia can't really do this because this would be, they were told this would be an act of war. And I was in the White House talking to the Secretary of State who told me just those words. And so the countries that have sought to have a modus operandi with the United States have been feel that they're in a trap, and they're trying to move out of it. Quite apart from the fact that there's a split in Islam between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and Iran is a Shiite country, and Saudi Arabia was the sponsor of ISIS to begin with, is the most extreme Wahhabi version of the Sunni religion. So you're having all of these dynamics all of a sudden all come in. The rest of the world is looking isn't in that much of a trap, but you can imagine what's happening with the global South countries, all of whom are being pushed into a real crisis, balance of payments crisis, because they can't pay the foreign debts, the dollarized debts. So I think the discussions now underway are, if there is a break between the US, European world, the West, and the civilization world, they'll just say, okay, we're breaking away. We're not going to have to pay the dollar debts anymore. We're going to go our own way. We're expelling the foreign foreign investors. We're really undoing the effects of colonialism now that we're seeing what's happening in Palestine as the result of what's happening there is what happened to us a century ago. And now we see the aftermath. For us is the aftermath for them. Now, finally, we've got to make a break. That's why this goes way beyond just who are the beneficiaries and losers of Israel-Iran. This is almost like an element, a trigger, a catalyst for the much bigger global split that's going to be taking, I suppose, 10 or 20 years to create a whole new alternative set of institutions, just as the United States spent the last few years of World War II planning the IMF and the World Bank and the whole post-war order. I think this is what the BRICS are doing right now, and I think Russia is going to be heading the BRICS next year. And all of their discussions now is how can we de-dollarize our currencies? Well, that's going to still leave Saudi Arabia and countries that have remained in the dollar area, prone to losing everything, and they're just not willing to do that. But the alternative is at least they're stuck. They can't do anything against Iran or the other countries because they're prone to be wiped out. And the big game changer that was talked about almost weekly back in the 1960s was what Iran can do very simply. Doesn't have to go to war. All it has to do is sink a ship in the Gulf of Hormuz. Finally, people are now talking about it today, just as they were talking 60 years ago. If they sink a ship in the Gulf of Hormuz, that's going to prevent the oil, so Saudi and Near Eastern oil from being exported. That's going to raise the price of oil tremendously, and it'll exacerbate the American and European inflation much more. There again, there goes any hope of Biden's re-election. Well, if you realize that Netanyahu and Biden have exactly the same problem, if they're about to be out of power if there's peace, if there's a settlement. Their only solution in both cases is to up the ante and extend the war to a much more destructive level. That's what I'm afraid of, and what a lot of people that I know are trying to figure out. I'm not in touch with these people anymore, thank heavens, and but I know their mentality. And you can be sure that just as people are talking about what'll Netanyahu do to stay out of jail, what'll Biden, not only will he lose the presidency, but now because of his son taking even larger bribes from Ukraine to represent Ukrainian interest by the son's payments with Burisma, and the big guy, meaning Joe, Biden has got more money from Ukraine than he's got from AIPAC, the Israeli lobbyist in America that has made him the largest beneficiary of Israeli AIPAC funding, $2 million. Ukraine has paid even more. So you have the president, Congress, all working for their donors. I mean, they're all frontmen when you come right down to it, but the frontmen are have the illusion that somehow they're really in power, and at least they don't want to go to jail, and that's how serious things have really got.